Yikes! You like that on 3, 1, 2, 3, you like it!
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hoo boy, that was rough. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, your pal, and the kid you copied off in math class. My name is Luke Braun. You can find me on Twitter at Luke Braun NFL. You can find the show on Twitter at Locked On Vikings, and thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day each and every day. You can also find Locked On Vikings on Amazon Fire or Roku. If you have those, just download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. This episode of Locked On Vikings is presented by Prize Picks. Daily fantasy made easy. Just pick 2 to 5 of your favorite players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, for example, if you had bet more than for any projection of Tony Pollard, you would have won some money. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match, up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's PrizePicks.com, promo code Locked On. So, as I said at the outset, yikes! The Vikings lose 40-3. Just get absolutely shellacked at home by the Dallas Cowboys. Now, the Cowboys are a good team, but good teams are supposed to do this to bad teams, not to teams with playoff aspirations, right? With Super Bowl aspirations. And I think that sends the Vikings back to the drawing board on a few things. Now, I have a lot of thoughts about what happened and why it happened, and we'll definitely spend most of the time getting into that. But, usually I'll do like a big recap of the game, going to kind of blow by blow and talk about the moments as they come. This one isn't worth that. They started off bad and it just got worse. The first possession the Vikings got was not only a 3-and-out, but a 3-and-out that ended with a strip sack that set the Cowboys right up in field goal range. They won the coin toss, elected to receive, which is an unorthodox move, and then immediately turned the ball over. And it just kind of got worse from there. So I'm not going to go over like the blow by blow of this. The blow by blow is the Cowboys scored, then the Vikings punted, then the Cowboys scored, then the Vikings punted. And sometimes there would be a turnover. I mean, it was just like that awful. But I do want to talk about one particular sequence. It comes in the third quarter, at the end of the second quarter, right before halftime. The Vikings end up in a 2-minute drill situation, down 20-3, basically needing, okay, we need to score so we can go in just down 10 and feel like we're reasonably in this thing, right? And thanks to a false start and then a sack, this sequence came down to a 3rd and 23, which they just did a white flag dump off play and they punted the ball away. And then the Cowboys actually went down and scored again. So you went into halftime down 23-3, feeling basically like, okay, this one's over. Let's just sleepwalk to the end. And then their next 3 possessions, 3rd and 19, and then they took a sack and punted. 3rd and 25, they dumped it off and punted. 3rd and 20, they took a sack and punted. Now let's itemize what happened on those from the 1st and 10 that then didn't get converted, like the last time they had a first down on each of those drives. False start, then a sack on that first drive. We talked about that. The second one, sack, offensive pass interference penalty, sack. So it took 3 sacks in one series and a penalty to get all the way down to a 3rd and 19. The third one, a sack, and then a delay of game penalty, and then they had their give up dump off. And then the fourth one had back-to-back false starts, and then just to make sure that there's good narrative continuity, a sack. You cannot have this happen. And then that was it for Kirk Cousins after that. Nick Mullins went in and the game was over. It was like 33-3 or whatever the heck it was. It was just a drumming. And you can't look at anyone there's no bright spot to this, right? There's no, at least so-and-so looked okay. No, Christian Darrisaw got concussed after 6 plays after being in the concussion protocol last week. He came back in, suffered another concussion. Was that the other thing re-aggravated or whatever? I don't know. I'm not going to speculate on it. But they have already said we're not going to try to get him in on a short week. We're being extra cautious with him. So no Christian Darrisaw against the Patriots. Andrew Booth got absolutely worked. The whole offensive line got worked. The whole defensive line got worked. The pass catchers got worked. Everybody got worked. Everybody lost their matchup, and everybody should go home feeling pretty bad about themselves. That's where the Vikings are at. And if you just want to know what to think about the Vikings right now, in this moment, they should feel bad They should look in the mirror, say, we did something real wrong going up to this one. What was it? How can we fix it? How can we prevent this from being the story of the season? And I guess that's where I want to take this for the rest of this show, because you're not going to learn anything new from me listing out all the crap that was bad. And I'm not going to be the kind of show that just sits and rags and complains all the time. I want to try to get something more substantive out of it. And I want you to just make a mental note of the moment that we're in right now. And then you can forget it forever. But a mental note of where the team is at, where for the second time in the season, they have been totally punched in the mouth and they walk away feeling like that basically nothing is going right. After a 7-game winning streak, bookended with 2 blowouts, which is very funny. There's the way I see it, there's 2 ways the rest of this season goes. A, they go into this game against New England, they win it, they pull it back out, they go into the playoffs being one of the top teams in the NFC. B, this facilitates a 2021 Arizona Cardinals style collapse that where everything falls apart and they go in as a dinky 4th seed and they die to the Cowboys again in the playoffs, who get the 5th seed, or maybe that's the Eagles or Giants or whatever. And they end up being a one and done that everybody forgets about. Those are the 2 ways I see this going right now. And I think the Vikings are at this fork in the road where how they react to this decides which one of those it is. And I know which one I prefer. I want to go into Wild Card Weekend feeling like, man, this team is really a team. And these guys can go beat, they're going to be the 2 seed if they pull out a few more wins, right? And then they get to play like Washington or San Francisco or like a weird Falcons team or something. Whoever gets the 7 seed, they get to play that team and probably be favored in that game. So they get to go be favored in a wild card game. And if they win that game, they're favored and they get another home playoff game for a chance to go to the NFC Championship. I want that to be the world rather than being the 4 seed, having to play one of these really good NFC East teams and going and maybe not even being favored in it because this Cowboys game broke them down so bad. Who do you want to be? So how do we get back into it? And I think to do that, you have to diagnose the problem, right? Which is what I'm going to do for the rest of the shows. What exactly was it that went wrong? How can I put this in more specific terms than, haha, Vikings stink. I knew they were fake. I don't want to be the guy that just says that. I want to tell you exactly what happened. And usually when you know what happened, you can figure out, okay, is this fixable or not? So we'll get into it. But first things first, it's the holiday season. And this holiday season, find what you love at Total Wine and More. So many great bottles to choose from. It's easy to find your new favorite Cabernet or Chardonnay and the perfect gifts for everyone on your list or something nice to bring to a party, with some help from even a friendly guide if you're like me and you don't know the first thing about liquor or spirits or whatever. And with all the confidence of knowing you found something special for the lowest price, you'll love what you find. Only at Total Wine and More. Curbside pickup and delivery are available in most areas. Visit TotalWine.com to learn more. Drink responsibly and be 21. I also want to talk to you about Turo. It is a car-sharing marketplace, the world's largest car-sharing marketplace, and you can book any car you want, wherever you want it, from a community of local hosts. You can book an SUV or a minivan, a pickup truck, or even test drive an electric vehicle or something else you've been curious about. And a lot of times, the host will actually drive that car out to you, and you can just pick it up from there. It's super easy. And there's a lot of options for just an affordable economy car. If you just need to get from point A to point B, you're not looking to break the bank. Every trip is backed by liability insurance. Terms and conditions and exclusions apply. So forget boring rental cars and find your drive at Turo.com. Once again, thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day, especially on days when it's not too fun to think about the Minnesota Vikings, like perhaps they just got destroyed 40-3 by perhaps their oldest rival. It's probably the Bears, but I digress. Thank you so much for hanging out. For your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today. They cover all things in the wide world of sports, especially with the World Cup going up. That'll be a must listen over there. Locked On Sports Today with Peter Bukowski. And check me out on Patreon, patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL. I will be traveling this week, so I will try to get something on Patreon, but no guarantees. That also means that, by the way, the schedule for this show is going to be a little different. While we're here, just know that the Wednesday show might be at an irregular time. I want to make sure I get a Wednesday show out. It'll also be what's normally on Friday, like the bold predictions and stuff, because it's the last day before the game. So we'll do that on Wednesday, but I'll be traveling all of Tuesday when I would usually be recording. So I'll figure it out, but it might be a weird time. And then the Friday show will also be a weird time because I won't be recording on actual Thanksgiving. I'll like be with people. So might be some irregular times, but there will be a show every day this week, including Thursday. There will still be crossover Thursday with Mike Debate of Locked On Patriots. So get in for all of that. Anyways, here's the deal. I think there's a couple things on first glance that went wrong in this game. And I do want to check on all of this stuff. It's a short week, so I won't get a great look, but grain of salt either way. It's just my live eye, right? I think the Vikings came in with a really bad game plan. And that goes both offensively and defensively. I think defensively, for one, Andrew Booth played, right? There was no Caleb Evans. He was in concussion protocol. So you had Andrew Booth getting the start, and he was an abject catastrophe. We kind of knew he would be an abject catastrophe, but you're down to your third guy there, right? Like you're not expecting that guy to be good. And it leads me to another, like a grander point about backups. Backups are going to play. I don't think we ever get to a point where backups don't play. And, you know, I've heard a lot, even on the postcast with Sam Ekstrom, he said like, man, they really got their depth exposed. Like, yeah, their CB3 had to play. Nobody's CB3 is good. And I think what gets exposed is the Vikings did not show a very good ability to paper that over schematically. You have to paper that over schematically. But they had a lot of one-on-ones with Andrew Booth. At a certain point, they were experimenting with Patrick Peterson shadowing CeeDee Lamb. The Cowboys moved CeeDee Lamb to the slot, and that idea pretty much ended. Not to mention Shannon Sullivan got exposed a little bit. Jordan Hicks had a horrible effort in coverage against Tony Pollard, gives up, I think, a 68-yard touchdown. Tony Pollard ended up with like 165 scrimmage yards because he got another breakaway touchdown on a swing pass where Shannon Sullivan got destroyed in a block by the tight end. So a lot of those weaker spots on the roster, I think, got exposed. Not just Andrew Booth. Now, Andrew Booth, they got production out of him. And yeah, if you have a third string corner in, they're going to get production on that guy. That's just like the world you live in. But you can mitigate that schematically by giving that guy more help over the top, by giving him easier assignments, and trying your best to kind of protect him. And I think the Vikings did a really bad job of that. Like they put too much faith in Andrew Booth. And far be it from me to criticize a coach for having faith in their players, right? You have to have some, but too much. But also, while we're on the defensive topic, they got blitzed in the run game. They just got absolutely steamrolled in the run game. I mean, they just got destroyed over and over and over and over again. And that, I think that belies a bigger problem with not having Dalvin Tomlinson. We really need him back. We really miss him. But B, also just the way that they fit the run, something was wrong with it where they didn't get a lot of penetration at all. And the Dallas running backs in particular, Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard, I think got so much more out of those run plays. I don't think the Vikings gave up a ton of push. Like they weren't getting washed out a lot until like the end parts of the game where they had been on the field all day and they were getting tired and they were getting blown out. And yeah, they lost a little energy. All right. But like in the beginning parts of the game, it wasn't so much that they were giving up these huge creases. It was that all the yards were coming after contact. And it was a lot of, the running back bumping into the back of the offensive lineman and then kind of rolling out and finding space and escaping. And to me, that's arm tackling, that's like poor discipline, and that's inability to shed blocks. So when it comes to the run game, it's hard for me to know if there was this like big schematic issue. To me, it just looked like dudes were locking up their blocks well, but they weren't peeking, they weren't shedding. Get your face across their face. Get your face to the outside, shed a block, go make a tackle. Dudes just weren't making plays. It was like passive. And that sort of passivity in the secondary as well, with guys playing too far off and stuff, it was a very passive vibe. And I don't know if that's a scheme thing so much as it is a player's attitude thing. And I don't mean like work ethic. I mean like the vibe that they took to this was a very like, I just don't want to be the guy that gets beat. And the Cowboys just were able to march constantly. So I think that's what happened a little bit on defense. But really, it was just guys losing their matchups. And the players were not good enough. And the coaches in that case, like, unless you have the stacked defense of the 2017 Vikings, where everybody's a stud, you're going to have Jordan Hickses. Everybody's defense has a Jordan Hicks and a Shannon Sullivan and Cam Bynums, and everybody has to start their Andrew Booth. Like, that is not a specific problem to the Vikings. But what you can't do is get in a world where Andrew Booth has to win his matchup or you lose the play and you let him out of 3rd and 12. Or Jordan Hicks has to win his matchup or it's a 68-yard touchdown. That shouldn't be a 68-yard touchdown. Jordan Hicks is going to get run by Tony Pollard. He is a fast running back, and Jordan Hicks isn't that kind of linebacker, and they got you. That can't become a touchdown. Something's wrong. And the inability to limit that stuff, especially when the whole point of your defense is to keep 2 safeties on the roof at all times so no explosive plays happened. Explosive plays happened all over the place. And whatever is wrong there needs to get fixed, but you don't fix it by replacing players, right? It's way too late for that, right? Jordan Hicks is on your team. Shannon Sullivan's on your team. Andrew Booth is going to play as much as Andrew Booth has to play. That's just like life. And hopefully Cam Dantzler has a couple games left on IR. Hopefully Caleb Evans can come back. He's definitely a better cornerback at this particular stage. I also want to say about Andrew Booth. I'm sure I'll get a bunch of questions about it in the mailbag. I'm not giving up on him or anything like that. He always was going to need a year, and the problem with him, I can go more in depth on it when somebody inevitably asks tomorrow, but the problem with him is that he bites on everything way too aggressively. The second he thinks he sees what's happening, he goes at it 100%, and that's both his strength and his weakness, but it's really exploitable, and he's just not right often enough right now because he's a rookie. And so I do think more experience and more time, he can kind of unlock what it looked like he could be in Clemson, and it comes down more to like the natural ability and stuff, and he's chock full of that. So I'm not worried about him in the long term in the slightest, but I do not want him even close to the field right now. He needs to stay on special teams. We'll get a Caleb Evans in who has a much lower ceiling than Booth, but right now is a little bit more pro-ready to start. Think Trey Lance versus Mac Jones, but with corners. So I'm not worried about that, but the point is you are going to, when you're in the playoffs, you don't get to have the better player across the board. The other teams are good. You're in the playoffs. So how do you find a way to dictate the matchups in a way that advantages you? That needs to be the fix. So if I want to fix the defense, we got to find a way to get better matchups when they have studs, when they have a dude like Tony Pollard who's playing lights out right now. He's playing like one of the best running backs in the league, to be honest. And that's not just this game. How do we make it so that guy doesn't end up on Jordan Hicks, the last guy you want him on, except maybe a defensive end? Like, how do we fix that? And that needs to be the question going through the Vikings' minds. I also want to get to the offense and like what went wrong there. First things first, though, let's talk about daily fantasy, which I don't like daily fantasy. I'm sorry, I don't like it normally. I don't like having to like compete with a pool of thousands of people, but that is where Prize Picks comes in. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. You don't have to put together a whole lineup, and it's just you against the house. So pick your favorite few players, say whether they'll get more than or less than their Prize Picks projection, and then if you're right, you can win up to 10 times your money. And it's not just the NFL. They do basketball, they do baseball when it's in season, hockey, probably will do things with the World Cup as well. So go check out all of that stuff at prizepicks.com, or you can get the app. And new users can get a 100% deposit match up to $100. It means if you put in $100 when you first sign up, you get $100 slapped right on top of it. That is with promo code Locked On. That is promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100 at prizepicks.com or on the Prize Picks app. So as bad as the defensive day was, where they gave up a score on the first 7 possessions, they did not get a stop. They did not force the punter onto the field or generate a turnover or turnover on downs. None of those things happened, but they did not get a stop until deep into the third quarter. Bad day. The offense's day was just as bad, if not worse. They could walk away with 3 points, and Kirk Cousins was pulled early in the fourth quarter, and it was like maybe overdue to do that. What went wrong with the offense to me feels a little bit less existential than what went wrong with the defense. They just went backwards a lot, and it was like sacks. It was always sacks. It wasn't, there was a problem with the run game not getting a ton, but they would get like 3-4 yards. You'd be in 2nd and 7s. You'd be in 3rd and 5s. Like they're not awful situations. But then they would go backwards, and then you get to 3rd and 20s and 3rd and 23s. Those are awful situations. And the backwards, some of that was they just had a lot of pre-snap penalties, which I think happened later in the game a little bit more. And I hate to. I'm not in the huddle. All right, I'm guessing here. This is 100% a guess, so don't flip on me. But it kind of feels like the game got to him. You're down 20 points, you get a little jittery, you jump off sides, right? And that was also, you had Blake Brandel in, you had Austin Schlottman in, who went into the game for Ezra Cleveland, which we were then told wasn't injury related. So I don't know what that was, if Cleveland just got benched. But I didn't catch him being the culprit on a lot of things. I caught, maybe he was, now that I think about it, but I thought it was Brandel mostly. I thought there was one on Ingram. There was one on O'Neal that I remember, but I'm struggling to remember one on Cleveland, but I could be wrong. Again, live eye, grain of salt. But what went wrong with the run game, I think, is just sometimes they just come in with a plan that beats zone runs. And I want to say that they flattened out the front a lot. They did a lot of the same stuff that Miami did, and then I think Arizona did and Washington did. That really helped stymie the run game. It didn't work against Arizona because we just kicked Arizona's ass. But that flatten out, tight fronts, bare fronts and stuff, those are zone run killers. And for those who don't know, what I mean by that is 5 people on the line and 3 of them inside the tackles. That's the key thing to understand here. And all of that beef up front makes it really hard for guys to reach block, to get to the other side of a player and then seal him off. It kind of means that what usually is a double team turns into a bunch of one-on-ones, and that's way harder to win. And so the zone runs weren't doing as well. And then the Vikings' plan, I think, was to establish the heck out of a zone run and then go play action boot. It was like a 2019 Gary Kubiak game plan, and they couldn't set up those play action. And then when it was time to call that play action, it was like a 7-step drop and they would give up an instant sack. And that kind of brings me to what I think is the more operative problem here. And that is the protections were totally broken for this game. Now, the Cowboys had Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, Dorrance Armstrong, Sam Williams playing well, a whole lot of threats, right? Whole lot of really good dudes. But what would end up happening is that once Christian Darrisaw went out, the Vikings had a really hard time adjusting and sliding their protections to give more help over to that side. And that is a criticism of Chris Cooper. It's a criticism of Cousins. It's a criticism of Garrett Bradbury, I think, mostly, but also a game plan thing. And they just weren't ready to have a backup tackle in. Now, look, Christian Darrisaw has an insanely huge impact on the rest of that offensive line. He is not just one dude. He really is anchoring everything else down in a symbiotic way that affects everybody because of the protections you can call when your left tackle is a stalwart. And then when that guy goes down, not only does it mean that that spot is a lot weaker, but it means that the protections called around him have to kind of put a lot more on everybody else's shoulders, unless you want the whole game plan hinging on Blake Brandel. Then everything has to change. It's all has a ripple effect. It's never just one guy. And so, if you lose one player on the Vikings, I think the only player I wouldn't choose to lose over Christian Darrisaw is Justin Jefferson. That is the only guy that I think could do more damage to the Vikings, and I guess Kirk Cousins. But outside of quarterback, it's quarterback and Justin Jefferson, and then Darrisaw, and then I would lose any other player on the offense outside of one of those 3. So just losing him really sucks. But they didn't do a very good job of executing those changes. And so what I think I saw was a lot of protections with guys splitting out wrong, guys setting wrong, and then suddenly a whole bunch of open stuff or one-on-ones that shouldn't have been one-on-ones. Or worse, they just let stuff be one-on-one. You get Micah Parsons one-on-one with Blake Brandel. You either have a ton of hubris or something got screwed up. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt and going with the latter. That just something got screwed up communication-wise, and it just wasn't quite right. And so I think that led to a whole bunch of the sacks. I should mention, I don't think you can learn anything about Kirk Cousins in this game. He was just beat up a whole bunch. He took 7 sacks, and that's just too many. And I don't think that there were a lot of opportunities for him to when he could avoid pressure and make a throw. I do think he did a decent job of that. But there just weren't a lot of opportunities where you go, man, a better quarterback makes that play. It's nobody's ever making that play. That's the way the whole game felt. But that 7 sacks did do something. It did cash for the second week in a row. One of our Friday bold predictions. I would usually do this on Friday, but because travel and the holiday weekend and stuff, I will get this out of the way now. There was a bold prediction that said that the Cowboys would have more sacks than Justin Jefferson had receptions. It wasn't even close, folks. JJ had 3 receptions. The Cowboys had 7 sacks on Kirk Cousins. And that means, as much as it pains me, and we got a party.
I feel life is fleeting, and all the temporary blips in the grand scheme of an apathetic universe, and yet we experience pain. The eternal sense and perception of time is relative.
Okay. Sorry. That got away from me a little bit. The game is just getting to me. So let's just reconvene tomorrow. All right. Get your questions in. I'm at Luke Braun NFL or at Locked On Vikings on Twitter. Ask me your questions for Twitter Tuesday. We will do that tomorrow. And then also just a reminder that this week posting times and schedules and stuff might be a little bit off. There will be a show that goes up on Thursday on Thanksgiving Day. That will be Crossover Thursday. So if you want to listen to a better preview of the Patriots, we'll have that. I won't record a show on Thursday, which means the Friday show will be out later than usual. So just be aware of that. And then the Wednesday show might actually be a little late too, pending travel plans and all that stuff. I will keep you all posted on Twitter. So make sure you follow me at Luke Braun NFL or at Locked On Vikings on Twitter. I'll see y'all tomorrow. And as always, Skull.